I don't think there's anything in the world that has had a bigger effect on my life than finding someone to mentor me. And that's actually probably not the right way to put it. I don't know if it's really accurate to say that I found somebody to mentor me so much as somebody found me and then invested themselves in mentoring. There have been a handful of really decisive moments in my life where somebody just kind of adopted me. They just said, You are somebody that I want to invest in. I want to pour myself into shaping who you become. And by shaping who you become, I'm shaping your future. When people ask, what's the most important thing that I can do for my spiritual life? Obviously, spending time with the Lord, obviously, reading His word just in whatever way works for you, at whatever pace works for you, whatever rhythm and so forth, obviously. But assuming that you are reading the word, assuming that you are talking to Him at some point each day, there is nothing that I can recommend more than find a mentor. When I was about 15, a guy named Brad just kind of adopted me and started to sort of mentor me. I don't even know if that's the way that he thought about it. If you asked him to tell the story, I don't know if that's the wording that he would use, but he basically took me under his wing. I wasn't even a Christian really at that point, and yet he just kind of mentored me into the faith over a couple of years, maybe without really meaning to, maybe without even realizing it, but that is exactly what happened. A couple years after that, there was another guy named Corey who was one of the worship leaders at the church that my family went to, and he just in the same way kind of took me under his wing. I was this like smart aleck kid, really arrogant. I was way too confident for my own good, the bad kind of confidence, not the good kind of confidence. We're not talking about good old self-esteem. We're talking about like, I just thought I knew better than everybody about everything. It's funny how you're like that when you're 16, 17. But I was a pretty much brand new Christian, really had no direction. I had a lot of passion early on. I was really fired up emotionally. I was still kind of in that mountaintop, but that mountaintop fades and all of that. That's why the majority of people, they'll go to a revival service, they'll go to a summer camp or something like that. They'll get really fired up. And then after about 3 weeks or 3 months, it's just sort of fizzled out and they're back exactly the same place they were. That is what would have happened to me if Corey Cloud hadn't just decided to take me under his wing and start to disciple me. He just started meeting up with me pretty regularly. He would find little jobs around the church that needed to be done that I'm fairly certain did not actually need to be done as excuses to spend time with me and just kind of get a captive audience with me and hang out with me so that he could teach me a little bit more about how to be a spiritual adult, not just an adult, but spiritual adult. He could really see that I had passion, but not a lot of wisdom, and I had a kind of the fire, but I didn't really have any direction. I knew I wanted to do something for the Lord, but I didn't really know anything about what that might look like. And the moment anybody started talking about concrete details, I would just start to get discouraged and scared and anxious, and I would just sort of shut it back down and kind of retreat back into myself. This was spiritual childhood or spiritual infancy. It was passion minus maturity, and yet Corey really poured himself into just kind of taking me by the hand and walking me into spiritual maturity, which is a slow process and a long process, and it does not happen all at once. You do not go from being really spiritually immature to being really spiritually well-rounded overnight. It doesn't happen in a year. It doesn't happen in 5 years. It's a long process. And I am 100% sure, looking back, I think of things that I said to Corey throughout that time, and I cringe really hard. I am straight up embarrassed about so much of this stuff that I said to him over the course of the time that he was kind of mentoring and investing in me. And yet he was patient through all of it. He definitely got annoyed at me sometimes. It was pretty visible. There were 100% times where I just let him down, right? I just didn't show up when I was supposed to. I just kind of left him hanging and flaked on him and other things like that. And yet he didn't take those as signs that I was just not worth his time. He just took those as part of the process of helping a spiritual baby grow into a spiritual grown-up. There was another guy when I got into college. His name was Alan Bandy, and he was one of the New Testament professors. He's still a working New Testament scholar now. He's written a lot of really great stuff. But actually, the most important part of Alan Bandy's life for me is not his scholarship, even though it's awesome and he's a really helpful biblical scholar. For me, the thing that had the biggest impact on me was just him. He would meet with me in his office constantly. He wasn't even my advisor. He had other students that he was actually the advisor for, and I had an advisor that I liked a lot but just wasn't as close with, and yet he would tell me stories from his life. He told me how he became a believer. He told me stories about back in his days. He was kind of like a punk in Washington, D.C. during sort of the height of the D.C. punk era. Told me about growing up and kind of getting into witchcraft and other things like that, and some really bizarre experiences that he had. I keep trying to convince him to write a book about that stuff because it's really interesting, and it's easier to sell that in an airport than it is to sell a large monograph about the New Testament. But he would have me over to his house to play board games, which, man, I actually hate most board games. I don't have a competitive bone in my body. Maybe it's because I was an only child. I just don't care about winning anything ever. It was kind of a problem. I don't even actually think that I'm like out of shape or anything like that, but I was never good at sports. And I think a lot of it was I could just never convince myself that it mattered for me to get the ball into the thing. But as much as I hated board games and found, like Magic the Gathering and all that stuff tedious, it was still really life changing just to be allowed to kind of do life with him and his family. He was creating opportunities to pour into me and invest in me. He was discipling me from one degree of maturity to another. All of this is to say that so much of who I am today is because of just a handful of dudes that decided I was worth their time. And so if you are an older, wiser, more mature follower of Jesus, man, if you're not already, I really want to encourage you. I don't know how you feel about yourself. I don't know what you think about your gifts. You have something unbelievably valuable to offer all of the younger believers in your life and in our church. You may not be a Bible expert, but you have wisdom to share. And actually, more importantly, you have presence to share. The younger believers in your life and in our church benefit immensely from you sharing yourself with them. And if you are like me, if you're a younger Christian, like I'm 31, I don't know anything, honestly, right? I've barely lived. My earliest memory is the OJ trial. You have wisdom to share with people like me. But if you are someone like me, there is unbelievable value in finding someone who can be a Brad or a Corey or an Alan to you. God will work through the people you allow to mentor you to radically change your life. And I'm praying that the Lord will open up that door for you the same way that he did for me.